41 days unconscious. My stepbrother stole my future. My mafia husband disassembled his piece by piece. The people who wait for you to close your eyes are the ones who were never on your side when you were awake. The heart monitor was the first thing Clementine Locke heard when she came back. Not voices, not music, not someone calling her name. A machine, beeping at 62 beats per minute, measuring a life that 41 days of coma had nearly subtracted from the world. Her eyes opened to fluorescent light and a ceiling she didn't recognize. White, institutional, the private wing of St. Maron's Hospital in Bay Ridge, a detail she wouldn't learn for another 40 minutes, when a nurse with steady hands and kind eyes would explain where she was, how long she'd been gone, and what had happened to put her here. A car accident, October 9th, a delivery truck running a red light on 4th Avenue. Her sedan T-boned at the driver's side door. 3 surgeries. Induced coma. 41 days of machines breathing for a woman whose body had decided to leave and whose heart, stubborn, furious, or relentless, refused to let it. But the accident wasn't the first thing that registered. The ring was. Left hand. 4th finger. A band she'd never seen. Platinum, thin, engraved on the interior with something she couldn't read in the fluorescent glare. It sat on her finger with the weight of a decision someone else had made while her eyes were closed. Clementine didn't wear rings, didn't own rings, had never been proposed to, engaged, or married in any of the 26 years she'd been conscious. She'd been unconscious for 41 days, and someone had put a ring on her finger. The door opened. Not a nurse, not a doctor, a man, standing in the frame with the specific stillness of someone who'd been waiting on the other side for hours, maybe days. Dark coat, white shirt beneath, no tie, hands at his sides, empty, visible, deliberate. The posture of a man who understood that the first thing a woman waking from a coma needs to see is that nobody in the room is holding anything threatening. He was tall, dark-haired, a face built from angles rather than curves, cheekbones that threw shadows, a jaw that looked like it had opinions, eyes the color of espresso left too long on the stove, almost black, carrying heat without displaying it. 32, maybe 33. The age where power hadn't yet hardened into cruelty, but had already stopped asking permission. "You're awake," he said. His voice was low, not soft, low, the kind that reached you without crossing the room. "Who are you?" Clementine's voice came out scraped and thin. 41 days of silence had taken everything except the instinct to ask the most important question first. "Ignacio Colombo." The name landed in the room like a weather change. Clementine didn't know it, not yet. But the nurse passing in the hallway hesitated when she heard it. The security guard at the wing's entrance adjusted his posture. The name did things to rooms before the man himself had to. "Why are you in my room?" Ignacio stepped inside. 1 step. No further. Respecting the geography of a woman who just returned to consciousness and found a stranger at her door and a ring on her hand. "Because 41 days ago, your father's attorney activated a sealed clause in his will. A clause that named me as your legal husband in the event your inheritance was contested." He paused. "It was contested. 18 days into your coma. By your stepbrother, who is currently living in your father's house, driving your father's car, and spending your father's money." The heart monitor climbed. 62, 68, 74. "My stepbrother," Clementine said. "Whitaker Locke. He filed forged probate documents on October 27th, claimed power of attorney, while liquidated your father's investment accounts, transferred the estate title into his name, all while you were lying in this bed." 81, 86. "And you, what, married me while I was unconscious?" "Your father married you to me, 18 months ago, in a clause he sealed with his attorney. I honored the activation. I didn't write it. I didn't consent." "No, you didn't. And when you're strong enough to contest it, that's your right. But right now, yeah, that ring is the only legal instrument standing between you and a stepbrother who has already taken everything your father built." The monitor held at 89, then dropped, slowly, the way a tide pulls back when the storm decides it isn't finished yet. Clementine looked at the ring, platinum, thin, The engraving she couldn't read. She'd read it later. 3 words in Italian that translated to a promise she wasn't ready to understand. She looked at Ignazio, standing one step inside the door, coat, no tie, hands empty. The stranger her dead father had chosen to be her husband. And somewhere across Brooklyn, in a house that used to be hers, spending money that used to be hers, sleeping in a bed that used to be hers, Whitaker Locke was living inside a future he'd stolen from a woman he thought would never wake up. He thought wrong. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Scrolling at midnight, sitting in traffic, so hiding in the bathroom pretending you're not watching stories on your phone. I see you, and I'm glad you're here. Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city, drop your country. I want to know who's in this room with me tonight. And how are you? The real answer, not the polite one. Whatever you're carrying right now, you can bring it in here. Now, have you subscribed? Because this story is going to make you forget what time zone you're in. Yeah, if you haven't hit that button yet, do it now. By part 3, you'll understand why. 9 months earlier, January. Clementine Locke was her father's architecture. Not his daughter in the passive sense. Not the child who simply inherited genetics and a last name. His architecture. The thing he built with the most care. The structure he reinforced every year with education, conversation, honesty, and the specific kind of love that says, I'm not raising you to need me. I'm raising you to survive without me. Harlan Locke was a commercial real estate developer, self-made, Brooklyn-born, a man who'd started with one rental property in Sunset Park at 24 and built a portfolio worth $47 million by 58. Not flashy money, infrastructure money, the kind that lived in buildings and leases and long-term holds rather than sports cars and galas. He raised Clementine alone after her mother died. Leukemia. Clementine was 6. I'm old enough to remember, young enough to let the remembering reshape her entire emotional foundation. Harlan didn't remarry for 12 years. When he did, Clementine was 18, packing for NYU. He married Genevieve Pratt, a woman who was beautiful and deliberate and carried the particular warmth of someone who'd studied warmth rather than felt it naturally. Genevieve brought a son, Whitaker, same age as Clementine, tall, blonde. Well, the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having been denied anything significant. Clementine distrusted him on sight, not because of evidence, because of frequency. Whitaker operated on a frequency she recognized from grant applications she'd read during her nonprofit internships, the frequency of language designed to acquire funding rather than earn it. He called Harlan Dad within 3 months, while smiled at Clementine across dinner tables, with the practiced ease of a man who'd learned that likability was a tool rather than a trait. Give him time, Harlan told Clementine. I don't trust him. I know, keep watching, your instincts are good. Harlan was diagnosed in March, pancreatic cancer, stage 3. He told Clementine on a Tuesday afternoon, his office in downtown Brooklyn, desk covered in building blueprints, and a brass skeleton key hanging from a hook beside the window. The key to the family safe in the basement of the Locke estate. The safe where Harlan kept the original will, the property deeds, the trust documents, everything that mattered. How long? Clementine asked. 8 to 14 months, depending on treatment. Are you doing treatment? I'm doing everything, but I need you to hear me clearly. Whatever happens to my body, your future is protected. I've built something that nobody can take from you. He took the brass key from the hook, placed it in her hand, closed her fingers around it. This opens the safe. The will is inside. Don't let anyone tell you what's in it. Read it yourself. And Clementine, whatever you find in there, trust that I made every decision with you in mind, even the ones that don't make sense yet. She wore the key on a chain around her neck from that day forward. Here's the thing about fathers who build. They don't just build for today. They build for the disaster they can see coming, the one they won't be alive to fight. They pour foundations thicker than necessary. They install locks on doors that don't seem to need locking yet. They write clauses in wills that look excessive until the exact moment they become essential. Harlan Locke knew 3 things. He was dying. His daughter was strong but vulnerable to the specific kind of theft that happens inside families. And Whitaker Pratt, His wife's smiling, agreeable, frequency-perfect son was already measuring the estate. So Harlan built a weapon disguised as a wedding, Ignacio Colombo. Harlan knew him through the buildings. Commercial real estate in Brooklyn doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a network of contractors, unions, zoning boards, and the families who influence all three. The Colombo family operated construction and development across South Brooklyn. Legitimate, licensed, profitable. And connected to a layer of influence that most people acknowledge through silence rather than conversation. Ignacio was the youngest of three brothers, the quiet one, the one who watched meetings instead of dominating them, who read contracts the way other men read body language, finding the clause that mattered, the sentence that carried weight, the 3 words buried on page 14 that would determine who won and who lost. He was 31 when Harlan approached him. February. Then a meeting that happened in Harlan's office after hours. No attorneys, no witnesses. 2 men and a conversation that would alter a woman's life without her knowledge. "I need someone to protect my daughter," Harlan said. "Not now. After. When I'm gone and the vultures land." "You have attorneys for that." "Attorneys can be bought. I need someone who can't be." Ignacio studied him, the same way he studied contracts, for the sentence that carried weight. "What are you asking me, Harlan?" "I'm asking you to marry my daughter, on paper, activated only if her inheritance is contested after my death. A sealed clause in my will. She won't know until she needs to." "You're asking me to marry a woman I've never met." "I'm asking you to protect a woman you've never met. The marriage is the legal mechanism. What you do with it after, that's between you and her." Ignacio said no, initially. Walked out, drove home, sat in his apartment in Cobble Hill for 3 hours. Then he read Harlan's portfolio. The buildings, the leases, the tenants, families, small businesses. A nonprofit daycare center operating rent-free on the ground floor of a Sunset Park property. Because Harlan believed children deserve space even when their parents couldn't afford it. He read Clementine's file. Not a surveillance dossier, a father's record, her academic transcripts, her nonprofit work, grant writing for literacy programs and women's shelters. A photograph from her NYU graduation. Dark hair, direct eyes, the face of a woman who looked like she argued with the world and occasionally won. He called Harlan the next morning. "I'll do it, but I have a condition." "Name it." "If she wakes up and doesn't want this, I walk. No contest, no claim. The marriage dissolves and I disappear. And if she does want it, then I'll earn it, not inherit it." The clause was sealed in March. Harlan died in August. And 5 months later, on a Tuesday night in October, a delivery truck ran a red light on 4th Avenue and sent Clementine's sedan into a telephone pole. The chain around her neck snapped on impact. The brass skeleton key was recovered from the wreckage by paramedics and placed in a sealed bag with her personal effects. 18 days later, Whitaker Locke walked into Brooklyn surrogate court with forged probate documents and claimed everything his stepfather had built. 3 days after that, Harlan's attorney activated the sealed clause, and Ignacio Colombo, a man who'd made a promise to a dying father he respected, put a ring on the finger of a woman he'd never met, lying in a hospital bed, breathing through machines, waiting. Day 1, St. Maron's Hospital, 4:17 p.m. Clementine pulled the ring off 40 minutes after Ignacio left the room, not out of rejection, out of principle. A ring she didn't choose belonged in her hand, not on it. Well, she held it under the fluorescent light, read the engraving she couldn't see before, Finché non torni, Italian, 3 words. She didn't speak Italian, but the nurse, a woman named Yael with silver streaks in her hair and the quiet authority of someone who'd worked private wings for 20 years, translated without being asked. "Until you return." Clementine set the ring on the bedside table. Next to the sealed bag of personal effects the hospital had catalogued after the accident. Inside the bag. Her phone, cracked, her wallet, and a brass skeleton key on a broken chain. Her father's key, the one that opened the family safe. She hadn't seen it since the night of the accident, hadn't remembered wearing it. 41 days of coma had dissolved the boundary between before and after. Everything on the other side of consciousness felt like a different person's life. She reached for the bag, Her hands were weak, muscle atrophy, Yael explained to Tharja explained, while normal after extended immobility. Opening the seal took 3 attempts. She held the key, brass, cold, the weight of a lock her father had told her to open herself. Whatever you find in there, trust that I made every decision with you in mind, even the ones that don't make sense yet. The door opened again. Not Ignacio this time, a man in a charcoal suit, 60-something, reading glasses on a chain. The specific grooming of an attorney who'd been practicing long enough to stop trying to impress and start trying to be precise. Clementine, my name is Ronan Hale. I was your father's attorney. Was? Am. The estate is still active, technically, though your stepbrother has made that complicated. Ronan sat in the chair beside the bed, placed a leather folder on his lap. Yeah, the same careful positioning of a man who understood that the documents inside would rearrange a woman's understanding of her own life. I need to tell you several things quickly, Ronan said, because Whitaker's attorneys are filing a competency motion tomorrow morning to keep you from contesting the probate transfer. If they succeed, your medical status, the coma, the recovery, becomes legal justification for maintaining his control over the estate. A competency motion. Not against me. Against a woman who just woke from a 41-day coma. In their framing, you're medically fragile, cognitively uncertain, unfit to manage a $47 million estate. Ronan paused. They don't know you're already asking the right questions. That's our advantage. Tell me what he took, Clementine said. Ronan opened the folder, read without inflection, the discipline of a man delivering damage in measured doses. October 27th, 18 days after your accident. Whitaker filed forged power of attorney documents in surrogate court, claimed you had designated him as a state executor prior to the accident. The signature was fabricated. Expertly, I should add. Whoever forged it studied your handwriting. He's been in my apartment, Clementine said. Flat, not a question. Likely. The power of attorney gave him legal access to the estate. He liquidated your father's investment accounts, $14.3 million. Neo transferred the Locke estate title, the house in Bay Ridge, the Sunset Park properties, the commercial holdings, into a shell entity registered in his name. All of it, all of it. In 41 days, Whitaker Locke disassembled everything your father built in 34 years. And he did it while you were breathing through a machine 10 miles away. The heart monitor climbed. Clementine let it. The anger was fuel. She wasn't going to medicate it away. And the will? She asked. My father's actual will. The one in the safe. Ronan's expression shifted. Something complicated. Something that contained both loyalty and guilt in a ratio he was still calculating. The original will is still in the safe. Whitaker doesn't have the key. He filed the forged probate using a copy he manufactured. Convincing enough for surrogate court, but not identical to the original. So the real will still exists. It exists. Yeah, and it contains the clause that activated your marriage to Ignacio Colombo. Right here. Pause with me. Because some of you watching this are already judging Harlan. A father who arranged his daughter's marriage without telling her. A man who made decisions about her future while she was alive and conscious, not in a coma, not incapacitated, but standing in his office holding a brass key and trusting him completely, and you're right to question it. Consent matters. Autonomy matters. A woman's right to choose her own life matters more than any father's fear. But here's the lesson that lives inside this story like a bone inside a body. Invisible until something breaks. Harlan didn't arrange the marriage because he didn't trust Clementine. He arranged it because he didn't trust the world she'd be standing in without him. And the difference between those two things is the difference between control and protection. He was wrong to do it without telling her. He was right about why he did it. Hold both truths. This story needs you to. I want to read the will, Clementine said. The original, from the safe. The safe is in the basement of the Locke estate, which is currently under Whitaker's control, I know. She held up the key. Brass, broken chain. But he doesn't have this. Ronan looked at the key, then at Clementine, the assessment of a man recalculating his client's capability in real time. You've been conscious for 6 hours. And I've been robbed for 41 days. I'm not waiting another one. Clementine, the competency motion files tomorrow. If you're seen leaving this hospital, Whitaker's team uses it as evidence of erratic behavior. Disoriented patient fleeing medical care. It strengthens their case. Then I don't leave the hospital. Someone else gets the will. She looked at the ring on the bedside table. Platinum. 3 Italian words. A man she didn't choose standing on the other side of a promise her father made. Where is Ignazio? Downstairs. He's been in the building since you woke up. He said if I want to contest the marriage, he walks. That was his condition. Yes. I'm not contesting it. Not yet. Not until I understand what my father built and why. She placed the key on the folder in Ronan's lap. Give this to Ignazio. Tell him I need the original will from the safe in my father's house. Tonight. Before Whitaker's attorneys file tomorrow. You're sending a man you've known for 40 minutes into a house controlled by the person who robbed you. I'm sending the man my father chose into the building my father built. If Dad trusted him with a marriage clause, he can handle a basement safe. Ronan studied her. 5 seconds. The silence of a man who'd known Harlan Locke for 20 years and was watching Harlan's architecture perform exactly as designed. He picked up the key. I'll tell him. Ronan, one more thing. Yes? The clause, the marriage. Did my father explain why Ignazio specifically? Out of every person he could have chosen? Ronan stood, placed the folder under his arm, paused at the door. Your father said one thing when he sealed the clause. He said, he's the only man I've met who reads the fine print and still says yes. The door closed. Clementine looked at the heart monitor. 74, dropping, steady. She looked at the ring on the table, didn't put it back on. Not yet. Day 1, 11:42 p.m. The Locke Estate, Bay Ridge. Ignazio Colombo hadn't broken into a building since he was 19. That time it was a warehouse in Red Hook, a union dispute, a locked supply room, a foreman who'd shorted his crew's overtime. Ignazio picked the lock with a flathead screwdriver and a patience that unnerved the men watching him more than the actual crime did. Tonight was different. Tonight he had a key. And permission from a dead man. The Locke Estate sat at the end of a private road in Bay Ridge. 3-story colonial, brick facade, October landscaping, boxwoods trimmed sharp, leaf cover minimal. The kind of property that announced its owner's values through maintenance. Harlan Locke had kept this house the way he kept his buildings. Structurally sound, visually precise, nothing wasted. Whitaker had changed the exterior lighting. Motion-activated floods replaced the warm porch lamps Harlan had installed. The yard felt surveilled rather than illuminated. The first signature of a man who'd inherited a home and immediately began defending it against the people it actually belonged to. Ignazio entered through the basement utility door. Side of the house, ground level. A lock he'd been given the combination to by Ronan Hale, who'd maintained backup access to the property since Harlan's death. A detail Whitaker's attorneys hadn't discovered yet. The basement was dark. Concrete floor, the smell of old wood and machine oil. Harlan's workshop occupied the east wall. Table saw, drill press, hand tools organized on a pegboard with the precision of a man who believed disorder was a moral failure. The safe was against the north wall. Freestanding, steel, combination and key. Harlan had given Clementine the key. He'd given Ronan the combination. 2 people, neither sufficient alone. Both required together. Ignazio punched in the 6 digits, inserted the brass skeleton key, turned it. The safe opened. Inside, organized the way Harlan organized everything. Compartmentalized, labeled. Each document in a separate folder, each folder in a specific slot. Slot 1, the original will. 43 pages. Signed, witnessed, notarized. The real document untouched, waiting for the daughter who was supposed to open the safe herself. Slot 2. Property deeds. Every building. Every parcel. Every lease. The paper architecture of a lifetime's work. Slot 3. Trust documents. Clementine's Education Trust. A charitable trust for the Sunset Park Daycare. An insurance trust structured to survive probate challenges. Slot 4. A sealed envelope. No label, no folder. Just a white envelope with one word written on the front in Harlan's handwriting. Clementine. Ignazio removed everything, placed each item in the reinforced bag he'd brought. But the envelope, he held it, turned it over, felt the weight. Something inside beyond paper, something small and rigid, not his to open. He placed it in the bag with the rest. Then he checked slot 5, the last compartment. A surveillance file. Not Meridian, not corporate, personal. Compiled by Harlan himself over what appeared to be several months. Photographs, financial records, handwritten notes, all focused on one subject. Whitaker Locke. Ignacio opened the file. Read under the blue light of his phone. Photographs of Whitaker meeting with a man identified in Harlan's notes as Desmond Gaines, a forger, specializing in legal documents, based in Atlantic City. 2 meetings documented. April and June, 4 months before Harlan died. Financial records showing Whitaker transferring $12,000 to a numbered account linked to Gaines. 3 payments, spread across May and July, and a handwritten note. Harlan's script, unmistakable, dated August 1st. 2 weeks before he died. W is preparing to contest the will. Forger retained. Documents in progress. He's moving faster than I expected. Sealed clause must hold. If Clementine is alive when this activates, she'll have Ignacio. If she reads this note, she'll know I saw it coming. Every move. I just couldn't stop it from this side. Harlan knew. Not suspected, not feared. Knew. He'd documented Whitaker's theft before it happened, photographed the meetings, tracked the payments, identified the forger. He'd watched his stepson prepare to steal his daughter's inheritance, and instead of confronting him, instead of calling the police or changing the locks or cutting Whitaker from the will, he'd built a counter-architecture, the sealed clause, the marriage, Ignacio, not a reaction, a preparation designed to activate after the crime. Because Harlan understood something about men like Whitaker. Confronting them before they act drives them underground. Letting them act, then dismantling them with evidence they didn't know existed. That's how you end it permanently. Ignacio closed the file, placed it in the bag, zipped it shut, checked his watch. 12:07 a.m. He'd been inside 11 minutes, clean, efficient, everything extracted. He closed the safe, removed the key, turned toward the utility door. A headlight swept across the basement window. A car in the driveway. Engine cutting, door closing. Footsteps on the front walkway. Not rushing, not cautious. The rhythm of a man coming home, expecting an empty house, expecting the night to be ordinary. Whitaker Locke. 30 minutes ahead of the schedule Ronan had estimated based on Whitaker's recent patterns. Ignacio didn't freeze. Didn't panic. Assessed. The utility door was 12 feet behind him. The basement stairs, leading up to the main floor, were 8 feet to his left. Whitaker's footsteps were moving toward the front entrance. Keys in the lock. The front door opening. 12 seconds to exit through the utility door. Clean, silent, gone. Ignacio moved. 9 steps, reached for the handle. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He ignored it, pulled the handle. The utility door opened, and the motion-activated flood that Whitaker had installed lit the side yard like a stadium. Let me tell you something about the moments that split a story in half. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with music or slow motion or a narrator telling you to pay attention. They arrive as a vibrating phone you should have silenced, a floodlight you didn't know existed, a 30-second window between invisible and exposed. Ignacio had everything. The will, the deeds, the surveillance file, the letter, and everything Clementine needed to reclaim her life and dismantle Whitaker's theft. All he had to do was not get caught carrying it out. The flood held for 4 seconds before the sensor reset. 4 seconds of full illumination on the side yard, the utility door, and the man stepping through it with a reinforced bag containing the entire Locke estate's legal foundation. Ignacio cleared the yard, moved along the property's east wall, shadow line, boxwoods providing partial cover. His car was parked 2 blocks north, deliberate distance, no visible connection to the house. Behind him, inside the house, Whitaker's footsteps moved from the foyer to the kitchen. Refrigerator opening, glass clinking, the sounds of a man settling into a home that wasn't his, built by a man whose daughter he'd robbed, containing a safe he didn't know had just been emptied. Ignacio reached his car, placed the bag on the passenger seat, started the engine. His phone vibrated again. "No, same caller," he answered. "It's done," Ignacio said. "Everything?" Ronan's voice, tight, waiting. "Everything, including a file Harlan compiled on Whitaker, meetings with a forger, payment records, handwritten notes. He documented the entire conspiracy before he died." Silence on the line. 5 seconds. The silence of an attorney recalculating a case that just went from contested probate to criminal fraud. "Bring it to the hospital," Ronan said. "Clementine needs to see all of it. Before the competency motion files at 9 a.m. Ignacio pulled away from the curb. Bay Ridge at midnight, streetlights orange, October air thin through the cracked window. In the passenger seat, a dead man's evidence, a stolen estate's blueprint, and somewhere inside a sealed envelope, a message from a father to a daughter he'd been protecting from a grave he hadn't reached yet. Day 2, 2:14 a.m., St. Maron's Hospital. Ignacio placed the bag on Clementine's bed without ceremony. While no explanation, no summary. He unzipped it, removed each item in order: will, deeds, trust documents, surveillance file, sealed envelope, and arranged them on the hospital blanket the way his mind organized everything. Sequential, prioritized. The most important item last. Clementine was sitting upright, 2 pillows behind her, the fluorescent light turned down to half. Yael's doing. And a kindness for a woman whose eyes were still readjusting to a world she'd been absent from for 41 days. Ronan stood by the window, arms crossed, the posture of an attorney waiting for his client to read something that would change the trajectory of the case and possibly her life. Ignacio stood by the door, 1 step inside, his position, the distance he maintained until he invited closer. "Start with the surveillance file," Ronan said. You need context before you read the letter." Clementine opened the file. She read for 9 minutes. Silent. The heart monitor, still attached, still measuring, held steady at 71, which told Ignacio more about this woman than any file her father had compiled. She was reading evidence that her stepbrother had been planning to rob her since April. Photographs of meetings with a forger, payment records, her father's handwritten notes cataloging the conspiracy in real time. And her heart rate didn't spike, didn't climb, held steady like a woman who'd suspected the betrayal and was now simply receiving confirmation. When she finished, she closed the file, set it aside. "He knew," she said. "Since April," Ronan confirmed, "and he didn't stop it. He chose a different approach." Clementine looked at the sealed envelope, the last item, her name on the front in Harlan's handwriting. The ink slightly smudged, written by a man whose hands were weakening from the disease that would take him 3 months later. She picked it up, broke the seal. Inside, 2 items, a letter, 3 pages, handwritten. Harlan's script, smaller than she remembered, the letters compressed by the effort of a body that was running out of time. And the brass skeleton key. Not her key, not the one recovered from the accident. A second key, identical in shape. Different in wear. This one was newer, less touched, the brass still carrying its original sheen. 2 keys, same safe. Her father had made a copy. Clementine held both. The original from the accident, worn smooth by months against her skin, and the duplicate from the envelope, untouched until now. Twin instruments. One she'd carried, one her father had kept. She set the keys on the blanket, opened the letter. "Clementine, if you're reading this, then the worst thing I imagined has become the realest thing you're living. And I'm sorry. Not for what I built to protect you. I'd build it again, every clause, every contingency, every decision you're about to be angry about. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there to explain it to you in person. Whitaker is going to steal from you. I've watched him prepare. The file in this safe contains everything. The meetings, the forger, the payments. I didn't confront him because confrontation would have driven him underground. Men like Whitaker don't stop when you catch them. They adapt. They find new methods. The only way to end it permanently is to let it happen, and then dismantle it with evidence they didn't know you had. That's what the file is for. That's what the will is for. And that's what Ignacio is for." Clementine stopped reading, looked at Ignacio, standing by the door, dark coat, hands at his sides. The man her father had written about like a structural component, a load-bearing wall installed to hold the building up after the architect was gone. She returned to the letter. I know you're angry about the marriage. You should be. I made a decision about your life without consulting you. The one thing I swore I'd never do after watching your mother lose every choice to a disease that didn't ask permission. But I need you to understand why I chose him. I met dozens of men through the buildings, contractors, developers, attorneys, union leaders, men with power, men with money, men with connections that could have provided what I needed, legal protection for my daughter. Ignacio was different, not because he was powerful, though he is, not because he was connected, though the Colombo name opens every door in South Brooklyn, because of something I witnessed in February. A tenant in one of my Sunset Park buildings, a woman named Paloma, a single mother, 3 children, fell behind on rent, 4 months. Her unit was scheduled for eviction, standard procedure, legal, clean. Ignacio owned the building next door. He heard about the eviction through the contractor network. He didn't know Paloma, had no obligation to her, no business reason to intervene. He paid her arrears, quietly, through the building's management company so it wouldn't appear as charity. Then he connected her with a job through his construction network. Administrative work, benefits, stable hours. She never knew who paid the debt. Her children never missed a night in their beds. I asked him about it, weeks later, casually. He said one thing I never forgot. Debt is a system. People aren't. You fix the system or you fix the person, but you don't punish children for the math. That's who I chose for you, Clementine. Not a protector, not a weapon. Well, a man who fixes systems without punishing the people inside them. The marriage clause activates only if your inheritance is contested. If it activates, Ignacio has agreed to step in, protect the estate, and dismantle whoever took it from you. He made one condition. If you don't want the marriage, he walks. No contest, no claim. He's not your cage, sweetheart. He's your key. I love you. I built everything for you. And the man standing in your room right now, if he's there, if the clause activated, if you're reading this, he's the last thing I built. Trust him the way you trusted me, not because he's earned it yet, because I asked you to. Dad, drop a comment right now if this letter just hit you somewhere you weren't ready for. Tell me. One word, one line. I want to hear it. Because here's the midpoint lesson. The one Harlan buried inside the architecture of everything he built. Revenge is easy. Rebuilding someone's dignity, that takes patience most powerful men don't have. Harlan didn't choose Ignacio for his power. He chose him because of a woman named Paloma, and 4 months of rent and 3 children, who never knew their beds were almost taken. He chose a man who fixes systems without breaking people. That distinction between power that destroys and power that rebuilds is the axis this entire story turns on. Clementine folded the letter. He set it on the blanket beside the 2 brass keys. Original and duplicate, worn and new. The architecture of a father's love split into 2 instruments that only work together. She looked at Ignacio. My father's letter says you're a key. Your father was generous with metaphors. He says you fix systems without punishing people. When possible. Is it possible now? With Whitaker? Ignacio stepped forward, not to the bedside, to the middle of the room, halfway. The geography of a man who was done standing at the door but wasn't going to presume the chair. The competency motion files in 7 hours. If it succeeds, Whitaker maintains control and you remain legally sidelined. If it fails, and it will fail, because Ronan is going to present your father's surveillance file to the judge, along with Falcone's forensic handwriting analysis of the forged power of attorney. Then the probate transfer collapses. And when it collapses, I dismantle every structure Whitaker built on top of it. How? Piece by piece, the way your father would have wanted. Clementine held his gaze. 9 seconds. The longest she'd looked at him since waking up. Not with trust. Trust hadn't been built yet. With recognition. The specific recognition of a woman seeing for the first time why her father chose this particular man. Then we start in 7 hours, she said. We start now. Ignacio pulled out his phone. Ronan, call the judge's clerk. Emergency filing. I want the surveillance file, the original will, and the handwriting analysis on her desk before Whitaker's team arrives. Ronan was already dialing. And Clementine, 2 days awake, 41 days stolen, holding 2 brass keys and a dead man's letter, felt something she hadn't felt since before the accident. Not safety, not yet. Momentum. Day 2. 8:47 a.m. Brooklyn Surrogate Court. Whitaker's attorneys arrived first. 2 of them. A firm called Mercer and Prideaux. Boutique, expensive. The kind of legal team retained by people who needed courts to see elegance, rather than examine substance. The lead attorney was a woman named Cordelia Mercer, 51, silver bob, a courtroom presence built on precision, and the specific understanding that judges respond to composure the way audiences respond to confidence. She filed the competency motion at 8:51, 9 minutes ahead of schedule. Clementine wasn't there. Still at St. Maron's, still attached to monitors, still technically a patient whose doctors hadn't cleared her for discharge, a fact Whitaker's team would weaponize within the hour. Ronan Hale arrived at 8:58, carrying Harlan's surveillance file, the original will, and a forensic handwriting analysis commissioned at 3 a.m. from an expert named Tova Brennan, a woman who testified in 47 forgery cases and hadn't been wrong yet. Ignacio arrived at 9:01, sat in the gallery, back row. No briefcase, no documents, the posture of a man who'd come to watch, not perform. But his presence rearranged the room the way his name rearranged hallways, silently, structurally. Without requiring a single word, Judge Adair Costigan presided. 63. Appointed. The kind of judge who read motions the way Ignacio read contracts, for the sentence that carried weight, buried beneath the language designed to distract from it. Cordelia Mercer stood first. Your Honor. My client Whitaker Locke is the legally designated executor of the Harlan Locke estate. Power of attorney was filed on October 27th, consistent with the decedent's documented wishes. We are here today because the decedent's biological daughter, Clementine Locke, has recently regained consciousness following a 41-day coma and may seek to contest the probate transfer. May seek, Judge Costigan asked. We anticipate a challenge, and we are filing preemptively to establish that Ms. Locke's medical condition, extended coma, ongoing recovery, documented cognitive fragility, renders her unable to manage the estate or contest the existing arrangement. Documented cognitive fragility. By whom? Cordelia produced a medical affidavit. Dr. Elwin Strasser, neurological consultant. He reviewed Miss Locke's hospital records and concluded that patients recovering from comas of this duration frequently exhibit impaired judgment, memory gaps, and diminished executive function. Has Dr. Strasser examined Mrs. Locke in person? He reviewed her records. Has he examined her in person, Counselor? No, Your Honor, but the medical literature. I'm familiar with the literature. I'm asking about the patient. Judge Costigan set the affidavit aside, not dismissed, sidelined. Continue. Ronan stood. Your Honor, I represent Clementine Locke. I'm entering 3 items into the record. He placed them on the clerk's table, one by one. The rhythm of a man who understood courtroom theater as well as Cordelia Mercer. He'd just spent 30 more years practicing it. Item 1, the original last will and testament of Harlan Locke, 43 pages, signed, witnessed, and notarized, retrieved from the decedent's personal safe, which was accessible only through a combination held by me and a physical key held by Ms. Ma Locke. Item 2, a forensic handwriting analysis by Tova Brennan, comparing the signature on the power of attorney document filed by Mr. Whitaker Locke with Mrs. Clementine Locke's verified signature samples. Ms. Brennan's conclusion: the signature is a fabrication, expertly executed, but structurally inconsistent with the subject's authentic writing patterns. Item 3, a personal surveillance file compiled by the decedent, Harlan Locke, documenting meetings between Whitaker Locke and a known document forger named Desmond Gaines. Photographs, financial records, Handwritten notes by the decedent dated August 1st, 2 weeks before his death. Cordelia Mercer's composure held, but her hands, folded on the table, shifted. A micro-adjustment, the body's acknowledgement of information the face refused to register. Judge Costigan examined the documents for 11 minutes. The courtroom waited. Ignacio watched from the back row, still patient, reading the room the way he read contracts, finding the sentence that mattered. The judge looked up. Mr. Hale, the original will, does it name Whitaker Locke as executor? No, Your Honor. The original will names Clementine Locke as sole heir and executor. Whitaker Locke is not mentioned in the document. Not mentioned at all? Not once. The courtroom absorbed this. Cordelia Mercer's pen stopped moving. Oh, I'm denying the competency motion, Judge Costigan said, and I'm ordering a full review of the October 27th probate filing. Mr. Hale, prepare a formal challenge. Ms. Mercer, advise your client that the forged power of attorney has been flagged for criminal referral. Criminal referral. 2 words that meant Whitaker's theft had crossed from civil dispute to prosecutable fraud. Ronan gathered his documents. Ignacio stood. The gallery emptied. And then, Ronan's phone buzzed. A message from Yael at St. Marin's. Someone accessed Clementine's medical records remotely this morning. Unauthorized login. IP trace points to Mercer and Prideaux's office network. The leak. Dr. Strasser's affidavit, the one claiming cognitive fragility based on records he'd never seen in person, was built on information obtained illegally. Someone at Mercer and Prideaux had accessed Clementine's hospital file without authorization to manufacture the competency argument. Ronan called the hospital, spoke to the administrator, confirmed the breach. Timestamp 6:17 a.m. 2 hours before the motion was filed. He called Clementine. The competency motion was denied. Criminal referral for Whitaker. But there's a problem. Your medical records were accessed remotely this morning by Whitaker's legal team. They've been inside your file. Silence. 3 seconds. What did they see? Everything. Your vitals, your recovery notes, your medication schedule. And Ronan paused, the pause of a man delivering information that would hit differently than a legal briefing. Your intake records from the night of the accident, which include the personal effects inventory. The key, they know you had it, which means Whitaker now knows you had access to the safe, which means he's going to the house right now to check if the safe was opened. Hear me on this, because this is where the walls close in. Clementine is lying in a hospital bed, 2 days conscious, muscles that barely respond, a heart monitor still counting her life in digital increments. She can't leave, can't run, can't stand in the doorway of her father's house and tell her stepbrother that the safe is empty and the evidence is gone. She is powerful on paper. The original will, the surveillance file, the handwriting analysis, and completely vulnerable in person. A woman whose body hasn't caught up with her mind. Whose fight is being waged by other people while she watches from a bed she can't leave. This is the darkest hour, not because the legal case is failing, it's winning. But because winning in court means nothing if Whitaker retaliates outside of it. And Whitaker, cornered, exposed, facing criminal referral, is no longer a man executing a plan. He's a man with nothing left to lose. Ignacio was already driving when Ronan called him. Whitaker knows about the safe. He's heading to Bay Ridge. Let him go, Ignacio said. Let him. The safe is empty. I took everything last night. There's nothing for him to find. And when he finds nothing, when he realizes the documents are gone, then he panics. And panicked men make mistakes they can't take back. That's when we finish this. Ignacio, Clementine is alone at the hospital. If Whitaker sends someone, she's not alone. I left Prospero at St. Marin's an hour ago. 2 men in the hallway. 2 in the lobby. Nobody gets near her room without identification and authorization. Ronan went quiet. The quiet of a man recognizing that the chess game he'd been playing in a courtroom had been running on a second board he hadn't seen. You anticipated this, Ronan said. Harlan hired me to fix systems. Whitaker is a system, and systems always do the same thing when they start failing. They escalate. The question was never whether he'd come for her. It was when. And now? Now we wait. Let him find the empty safe. Let him make his next move. And then, piece by piece, we take apart everything he thought he'd built. The line went dead. Brooklyn at morning, traffic building, a man driving toward the endgame of a promise he'd made to a father he respected, and a woman he was only beginning to understand. Day 2, 1:38 p.m., St. Maron's Hospital. Clementine was standing when Ignacio returned. Not well, not steadily. One hand on the IV pole, one on the bed rail, her body negotiating with gravity like two old enemies trying to share a room. Yael had tried to stop her twice. Clementine had refused twice, with the specific politeness of a woman who understood that the nurse was right and didn't care. She needed to be vertical, needed to feel her own weight. 41 days of lying down while the world rearranged itself around her. She was done being horizontal while decisions happened above her. Ignacio stopped in the doorway, his position, one step inside. But something in his expression shifted when he saw her standing. Not concern, not surprise, recognition. The look of a man seeing the woman Harlan had described in the file come to life in front of him. "You should be in bed," he said. "You should have told me about the security detail." Prospero is discreet. Prospero is 6'3" and standing in my hallway wearing a coat that costs more than my hospital bill. Discreet isn't the word. Ignacio almost smiled. The corner of his mouth shifted. A millimeter, maybe less. The ghost of an expression on a face that had been trained to give nothing away. He entered the room, not to his usual position. Further, to the chair beside the bed. Sat down. The first time he'd occupied that chair since she'd been conscious. The distance between door and bedside. Closed voluntarily without being asked. "Whitaker went to the house," Ignacio said. Arrived at 11:15, went directly to the basement, found the safe open and empty." "How do you know?" "I have a camera on the utility entrance. Installed it last night after I left. Old habit." "You surveilled my father's house." "I surveilled Whitaker's reaction. There's a difference." Clementine studied him, the way she studied grant applications, looking for the gap between what was presented and what was real. What did he do? "Stood in the basement for 4 minutes. Didn't move, then went upstairs, made 3 phone calls, and left the house at 12:07. 3 calls? To whom? Cordelia Mercer, his attorney, Genevieve Pratt, his mother, and a third number Ronan is tracing now." Genevieve, Clementine's stepmother, the woman who'd married Harlan with studied warmth and brought a son who'd been measuring the estate since his first Sunday dinner. Clementine hadn't thought about Genevieve since waking up. The coma had compressed her priorities: survival, theft, marriage, counterattack. Genevieve existed in a different category. Not villain, not victim. The ambient architecture of a household that had been quietly hostile since the wedding. "Does Genevieve know what Whitaker did?" Clementine asked. Unclear. But she's the only person outside his legal team he called after finding the empty safe. That's not a son calling his mother for comfort. Well, that's an operative calling a partner. You think she's involved? I think your father married a woman whose son became a thief. Whether she built the thief or just benefited from the theft, that's what we'll find out. The third phone call, the unknown number. Ronan traced it by 2 p.m. Not an attorney, not a family member. A property management company called Alcott and Ware. Commercial, mid-tier, operating primarily in New Jersey. Why would Whitaker call a property management firm 20 minutes after discovering the safe was empty? Ignacio knew. The calculation took him less than 10 seconds. He's moving the assets, the properties he transferred into his shell entity. He's trying to sell them before the probate challenge freezes the estate. Can he do that? Clementine asked. If he files the sale agreements before the court issues an injunction. Technically, yes. The transfers are fraudulent. Yeah, but a buyer who purchases in good faith creates a legal complication that could take months to unravel. Months I don't have. Months neither of us has, which is why we're not going to let him file. Here's the turn, right here, the moment where the story pivots from defense to offense. For 2 days, Clementine has been reacting, waking up, learning, absorbing blow after blow. The theft, the marriage, the competency motion, the medical records breach. She's been receiving information from men who stand in her doorway and sit by her bed and drive through Brooklyn at midnight, carrying evidence she can't carry herself. She's done receiving. I want to talk to Whitaker, Clementine said. Ignacio's expression didn't change, but his body did. A micro stillness, the physical equivalent of a man's internal alarm activating. That's not advisable. I didn't ask for advice. I asked for a phone call. Clementine, he's facing criminal referral. His attorney will have told him not to communicate with anyone connected to the case. He won't take the call. He'll take mine. Why? Because Whitaker doesn't see me as a legal opponent. He sees me as the girl who was unconscious for 41 days. The stepsister who's too weak to fight, too fragile to function. He's been told that by his attorneys, by Dr. Strasser's affidavit, by every assumption he's made since the night of the accident. She straightened. The IV pole swayed. She held it still. He'll take the call because he thinks I'm calling to negotiate, to offer a settlement, to be the reasonable, fragile woman the competency motion described. And instead, I buy you time. I keep him on the phone while Ronan files for an emergency asset freeze. 20 minutes. That's all you need. Ignacio looked at her. Not at the hospital gown or the IV or the monitors. At her. The woman standing on legs that barely worked, designing a strategy from a bed she refused to stay in, using her own perceived weakness as a weapon. Your father was right about you, he said. My father was right about a lot of things, including you. She called at 2:47 p.m. Whitaker answered on the second ring. Clementine? His voice, warm, concerned, performed, the frequency of a man who'd rehearsed this conversation. My God! I heard you woke up. I've been trying to reach the hospital, but they wouldn't. I know what you did, Whitaker. Silence. 2 seconds, the warmth evaporating like steam off a surface that was never actually heated. I don't know what you've been told, but I've been told you forged my signature, filed fraudulent probate documents, liquidated $14 million from my father's accounts, transferred his properties into a shell entity. And you did it while I was lying in a coma 10 miles away. She paused, let the list settle. What I haven't been told is why, so I'm asking. Whitaker recalibrated. She could hear it, the shift in breathing, the recalculation of approach, the man who'd studied warmth deciding which version to deploy next. Your father's estate was complicated, Clem. There were debts, obligations, things he didn't tell you about. I was trying to protect the assets from me, from creditors, from probate delays, from a system that would have frozen everything while you were incapacitated. I was managing the situation. You were stealing. I was protecting our families. We're not family, Whitaker. We never were. You were a guest in my father's house, and you robbed it before his body was cold. 7 minutes. She held him for 7 minutes. Whitaker cycling through performances, concern, defense, righteous indignation, wounded brotherhood, each one failing. Each one met with the flat, specific clarity of a woman who'd read his file, seen the photographs, held the evidence her father compiled, and wasn't interested in any version of events except the documented one. At 2:54 p.m., 7 minutes into the call, Ignacio received a text from Ronan. Filed. Emergency asset freeze granted. All properties under Whitaker's shell entity are locked. Nothing moves. Ignacio showed Clementine the screen. She read it while Whitaker was mid-sentence, explaining, justifying, performing concern she could see through the way light passes through tissue paper. Whitaker, she said, cutting him off. What? Check your email. Your attorney should have a filing notification by now. She hung up, set the phone on the bed, looked at Ignacio. Piece by piece, she said, and for the first time since she'd woken up, Ignacio Colombo smiled. Not a ghost, not a millimeter, a real smile, brief, warm. The expression of a man watching a promise he'd made to a dead father being fulfilled by the living daughter. Piece by piece, he confirmed. Day 9, the Locke Estate, Bay Ridge. Clementine walked into her father's house on legs that had been practicing for 7 days. Physical therapy, twice daily. Yael supervising with the quiet intensity of a nurse who'd watched her patient go from comatose to courtroom strategist in 72 hours and wasn't about to let muscle atrophy be the thing that stopped her. The first 3 steps, bed to chair, the distance of a woman relearning the language of her own body. The second day, 12 steps, room to hallway. The hallway where Prospero stood in his expensive coat, pretending not to watch, watching everything. By day 5, the full corridor. Unassisted, slow but sovereign. Each step a reclamation of territory her body had surrendered while machines kept her alive. By day 7, discharge. Paperwork signed, monitors removed, the brass key around her neck again, the original worn smooth, restrung on a new chain Ignacio had brought without being asked. He'd noticed the broken chain in the personal effects bag. Didn't mention it, just appeared with a replacement, sterling silver, the right length. The kind of detail that revealed a man who paid attention to systems, including the small human ones. Day 9, October 20th, the Locke estate. Ronan had arranged the meeting. Neutral ground. Except it wasn't neutral. It was Clementine's. The house her father built. The house Whitaker had occupied for 41 days like a tenant in a life that didn't belong to him. The court's emergency asset freeze had held. Every property under Whitaker's shell entity locked. His personal accounts flagged pending the criminal investigation. Cordelia Mercer had withdrawn as counsel 3 days ago, filed a motion to sever representation. The specific legal maneuver of an attorney who'd realized her client's case wasn't just losing, it was radioactive. Whitaker arrived with a new attorney, a man named Grady Polk, court appointed. The downgrade from Mercer and Prideaux visible in everything, the suit, the briefcase. The posture of a lawyer handling a case he hadn't chosen and couldn't win. They sat in the dining room, Harlan's dining room, the long oak table where Sunday dinners had happened, Harlan at the head, Clementine at his right, Genevieve performing warmth across the centerpiece, Whitaker calibrating his smile for maximum effect. No centerpiece now, no Sunday warmth, just documents. Clementine sat at the head of the table, her father's chair, the first time she'd occupied it. The brass key resting against her collarbone, visible, deliberate. Ignacio sat to her left, Ronan to her right. The geometry of a woman flanked by her attorney and her husband. The words still foreign in her mind, still carrying the weight of a decision she hadn't made, but fitting differently now than it had 9 days ago. Whitaker sat across the table, Grady Polk beside him. The distance between the two sides, 8 feet of oak, felt continental. Whitaker looked worse, as 9 days of asset freezes and criminal exposure had done what 41 days of theft and impunity hadn't, carved lines into a face that had always been smooth. His confidence was still present, but repositioned, defensive rather than casual, the smile replaced by something watchful. "Clementine," he said, "you look—" "Don't." One word. The table absorbed it. "We're here because Ronan has prepared a settlement framework," Clementine continued. "Not because you deserve a settlement. Because my father built something worth more than the time it would take to destroy you in court. And I'd rather spend that time rebuilding what you stole than watching you explain to a jury why you stole it." Ronan opened his folder. 4 documents, laid flat on the oak like surgical instruments. Document 1. Full restitution. Every dollar liquidated from Harlan Locke's investment accounts is returned, $14.3 million. To transferred to the estate's original accounts within 30 days. "I don't have 14 million, Whitaker started. "You have 12.7. The remaining 1.6 was traced by our forensic auditor to purchases, transfers, and expenditures made during the 41-day period. Those items will be liquidated and returned. The car, the watches, the memberships, everything you bought with money that wasn't yours." Whitaker's jaw tightened. Grady Polk placed a hand on his arm. "Yeah, the universal attorney gesture for stop talking. Document 2. Property reconveyance. Every title transferred to your shell entity is reconveyed to the Locke estate. The shell entity is dissolved permanently. Document 3. Criminal cooperation. You provide a full statement regarding your engagement of Desmond Gaines. dates, payments, instructions, the forgery process. In exchange, Ronan recommends to the district attorney that criminal charges be reduced from a felony to a misdemeanor. You will not avoid prosecution, but you'll avoid prison. And document 4? Grady Polk asked, speaking for the first time, the voice of a man who knew the answer would be the worst one. Document 4 is a permanent restraining order. Whitaker Locke is prohibited from contacting Clementine Locke, entering any property owned by the Locke estate, or initiating any legal action regarding Harlan Locke's will, trust, or assets. A violation triggers immediate activation of the full felony charge. 4 documents, the complete dismantling of Whitaker Locke's 41-day empire, not through violence, not through intimidation, through paper, through evidence, through the meticulous, piece-by-piece architecture of a system designed to rebuild rather than destroy. Leave a comment if you've been waiting for this moment. Tell me how it feels, because this right here is what Harlan built. Not a weapon, a system. And the system just worked. Whitaker stared at the documents, the table, the room he'd eaten Sunday dinners in, the chair Clementine occupied, her father's chair, the key around her neck that had opened the safe he'd never been able to touch. And if I refuse? Whitaker said, quietly, the last negotiation of a man with no leverage. Clementine leaned forward. Then we skip the settlement. The criminal case proceeds at full felony level. Forgery, fraud, theft by deception. The surveillance file Dad compiled becomes Exhibit A. Tova Brennan's handwriting analysis becomes Exhibit B. And every photograph of you meeting Desmond Gaines becomes the front page of every outlet that covers white-collar crime in New York. She paused. Let the architecture settle. You spent 41 days taking things from me while I couldn't open my eyes. I'm giving you 41 seconds to decide whether you'd like to keep yours open in a courtroom or sign these documents and disappear. Whitaker looked at Grady Polk. Polk looked at the documents. The look between them lasted 3 seconds. The entire duration of a legal career's worth of advice compressed into a glance that said sign. Whitaker picked up the pen. Signed. 4 documents, 4 signatures. Each one an act of demolition, not of Clementine's future, but of his own counterfeit version of it. Ronan collected the documents, witness signatures, notarization scheduled for that afternoon, the legal machinery clicking into place with the precision of a safe lock turning. Whitaker stood. Grady Polk stood. They walked toward the dining room door. Whitaker stopped, turned, looked at Clementine, not with anger, not with remorse, with the flat recognition of a man seeing clearly for the first time the woman he'd underestimated. Your father, he started. My father saw you coming 18 months ago, documented every move, built a counter-strategy from his deathbed, and chose a man to execute it who'd dismantle your entire operation without raising his voice. She held Whitaker's gaze. You were never smarter than him. You were just louder. Whitaker walked out. Front door, gravel driveway, a car that would soon be repossessed. Gone. The dining room went silent. October light through the windows. Dust particles floating in the beams like evidence of time passing through a room that had finally been reclaimed. Ronan closed his folder, stood. I'll have the notarized copies by 5. The property reconveyance will process this week. The DA's office will schedule Whitaker's cooperation interview within 10 days. He looked at Clementine. Your father would be very proud. My father would say there's still work to do. There is, but the foundation is back. Everything else, that's building. And building was always Harlan's favorite part. Ronan left. The front door closed. 2 people in the dining room. Clementine at the head of the table. Ignacio to her left. The oak between them holding the ghost weight of documents that had just ended a 41-day siege. Clementine looked at him. The man her father chose. The man who'd entered this house at midnight and emptied a safe and installed a camera and stationed security at her hospital door and smiled, once real, when she'd beaten Whitaker at his own game from a bed she could barely sit up in. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, thank your father. I'm thanking both of you. But you're the one who's here. 4 months later. February. The Sunset Park daycare reopened on a Tuesday. Clementine stood in the doorway of the ground floor unit. the one Harlan had kept rent-free for 11 years because he believed children deserved space even when their parents couldn't afford it. Whitaker had terminated the lease during the 41 days, one of his first acts, not because the space was valuable, the rent-free arrangement generated no income, because removing it simplified the portfolio for liquidation. He'd evicted children to make a spreadsheet cleaner. The reconveyance restored the lease. Clementine didn't just reinstate it, she extended it. 20-year term, rent-free, written into the trust her father had built and she now administered. The daycare director, a woman named Paloma Reyes, signed the new agreement in the same dining room where Whitaker had signed his surrender. Paloma, the same woman Ignacio had helped 4 years ago, 4 months of unpaid rent, a job through the construction network. 3 children who never lost their beds. Clementine didn't know that story yet. Not the details, not Ignacio's involvement. She knew only that the daycare mattered to her father, and therefore mattered to her. The connection between Paloma and Ignacio, between a debt quietly paid and a man her father chose specifically because of how he paid it, remained invisible. For now. The estate rebuilt in stages, not fast, not dramatic, the way Harlan would have done it, methodically, structurally, each decision load tested before implementation. The $14.3 million was restored by December. Whitaker's cooperation agreement ensured the transfers, grudging, incremental, monitored by Odessa Price, the forensic auditor Ronan had retained. Every dollar tracked, every asset cataloged, the watches returned, the car repossessed, the memberships canceled, the 41-day spending spree reversed with the clinical thoroughness of a surgeon removing sutures. The properties returned to the Locke Estate Trust. 7 buildings, 43 residential units, 12 commercial leases, the infrastructure of a man's life work, restored to the daughter he'd built it for. Whitaker's criminal case resolved in January. Misdemeanor, probation, community service, the reduced charge honored per the settlement agreement. He moved to Connecticut with Genevieve, a rented apartment, no property, no trust fund, no access to the family he'd tried to steal from. Genevieve called Clementine once. November. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. Genevieve cried. Clementine listened. Neither of them said anything that changed the outcome. Some fractures don't mend, they just stop bleeding. And now, the part you've been waiting for. Not the money, not the properties, not the legal victory. The man standing in the doorway. Ignacio didn't leave after the settlement. This was the part Clementine hadn't anticipated. The clause, the sealed marriage, was a legal mechanism, a structural intervention designed to protect assets and provide authority during a crisis. Once the crisis resolved, the mechanism should have deactivated, the marriage should have dissolved, Ignacio should have walked, as promised, as conditioned, as agreed in a conversation with a dying man who'd given him permission to disappear. He didn't walk. Not because he claimed a right to stay, because he asked. The conversation happened in November, Harlan's study, 2nd floor of the Bay Ridge house, the room where blueprints still covered the desk, and a hook beside the window still held the outline of a brass key that now hung around Clementine's neck. The settlement is closed, Ignacio said. The assets are restored. The criminal case is resolved. The clause has served its purpose. I know. Which means the marriage can be dissolved. Ronan can file the annulment this week. Clean. Simple. No contest. I know that too. So I'm asking, not as your legal husband, not as the man your father chose, as someone who spent 4 months watching you rebuild everything that was taken from you, and understanding more clearly every day that Harlan didn't just build an estate. He built a person, and that person is someone I'd like to keep knowing. Clementine looked at him. The same assessment she'd made on day 1. Hospital bed, fluorescent light, a stranger in the doorway. But the data had changed. 4 months of data, 4 months of a man who'd entered a house at midnight and faced down a courtroom and stationed security at her door and brought a silver chain for a broken necklace without being asked. 4 months of a man who read the fine print and still said yes. What does keeping knowing me look like? She asked. It looks like dinner. Tomorrow. Somewhere that isn't a hospital room or a courtroom or a house where documents were signed under duress. A date. A beginning. The date was Wednesday. A restaurant in Park Slope. Not visible, not performed. A corner table chosen for privacy rather than broadcast. Pasta. Red wine for him. Sparkling water for her. Not because she was pregnant anymore, but because she'd spent 4 months rebuilding her body and preferred clarity to comfort. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the case. Not about Whitaker or the will or the clause. About other things. The things that exist beneath the architecture of crisis. His brothers, her mother's death, the specific loneliness of being the child who's left behind, and the adult who builds walls to compensate. He told her about Paloma, the rent, the job, the 3 children. "That's why my father chose you," Clementine said, not a question. "That's why he trusted me. Whether you choose me, that's a different question." "Oh, and it's yours." She reached across the table, took his hand, held it the way you hold something you've decided to keep, not desperately, not tentatively. With the deliberate grip of a woman who'd spent 41 days unconscious and intended to be fully awake for every decision she made from here forward. "I choose you," she said. "Not because my father did, because I've watched you operate for 4 months and you've never once made a decision about my life without asking me first." That's all I needed to see. Here's the last lesson. The one this entire story has been building toward since a heart monitor started beeping in a hospital room in Bay Ridge. You don't owe loyalty to blood that poisoned you. Family is whoever held your hand when you couldn't hold theirs. Whitaker shared a last name and a dining room table, and 41 days of opportunity. And he chose theft. Ignacio shared nothing, no history, no name, and no obligation except a promise to a man he respected. And he chose presence. Family isn't who shows up at the dinner table. It's who shows up when the table's been taken. Remember that. Especially on the days when the wrong people try to convince you that blood entitles them to your loyalty. It doesn't. Loyalty is earned. By showing up. By asking instead of deciding. By reading the fine print and still saying yes. March. The Locke estate. Evening. The study. Blueprints still on the desk. The hook beside the window. Empty since September. Since Harlan took the key down and placed it in his daughter's hand. Clementine hung something on that hook. Not the key. The key stayed around her neck. Original, brass, worn smooth. The object she'd carried across every crossing. Coma to consciousness. Theft to restoration. Stranger to husband. She hung the ring. Platinum. Thin band. Finchain on tourney. Until you return. She'd returned. To the house. To the estate. To herself. And the ring, once a symbol of a decision made without her, was now a symbol of a decision made entirely by her. Same object, different meaning, recontextualized by the 4 months between waking up and choosing to stay awake. Ignacio found her there, standing in the study, looking at the ring on the hook and the blueprints on the desk and the window that faced the street where her father had built a life designed to outlast him. "You hung it up," he said. "I'll put it back on." When it's earned. By me? By us. Together. He stood beside her. Close. The distance that had started at the doorway and moved to the middle of the room and finally arrived here. Shoulder to shoulder. In a dead man's study. Looking at the evidence of everything that brought them to this point. Clementine took his hand. He took hers. 2 keys. 2 people. 1 house full of blueprints and dust and the stubborn, structural love of a father who'd built his final masterpiece not in brick or steel, but in a clause that brought 2 strangers together and trusted them to figure out the rest. They were figuring it out, piece by piece. Thank you for staying. All 9 parts, every courtroom, every midnight drive, every moment you dropped a comment or told me where you were watching from or said, "Go one more time." This story was about theft, the kind that happens while you're sleeping. The kind committed by people who eat at your table and smile at your face and wait for your eyes to close. But it was also about building, about fathers who construct futures their children won't need until the worst day arrives, about strangers who read the fine print and say yes anyway, about women who wake up with nothing and stand up and take it all back. If you haven't subscribed yet, after 9 parts, after everything we just built together, you already know this is where you belong. Hit that button. I'll see you in the next one. Protect what's yours, build what lasts, and never let anyone sign your name while your eyes are closed. See you tomorrow.